you're hurting, if you've been betrayed. I'm Dr. Carol, and thank you for joining me. If you have been betrayed, especially in your marriage or intimate relationships with sexual betrayal, sexual addiction, you know it hurts. But it can make a difference if you understand something of the why, if you understand some of the processes in your own heart, and frankly, in your spouse's heart. Now, every person is unique, and we're never pretending that one person's story is just like every other, but it can really help you feel less crazy when you experience other people feeling the similar things to what you have felt and see some of the steps to take forward, when you have a safe place to process your grief and pain and betrayal and just all that kind of stuff. My guest on the program today, Lyschel Burket, has experienced this herself, and now she helps others in finding their journey to wholeness. Lyschel has been working with women since 2008 as they take steps toward healing from the hurt of betrayal and in their pursuit of God. She's facilitated support groups both in person and online. She has been a founder of Hope Redefined that helps people walk through these very painful episodes of their journey and see what God has to offer in the middle of it. In this conversation, you will not hear any pat answers. You will not hear any magic cures for the hurt that you feel. But you will hear some things that help you understand how addiction is not about you, how your partner's use of porn doesn't mean that you haven't been sexy enough or whatever. You'll also hear some things about what it looks like to walk through this journey, even if your spouse is not wanting to walk it with you. And then, of course, what it looks like to invite Jesus into the middle of this. I know that if you are experiencing the pain of betrayal, this will encourage and help you. Lyschel Burket. Well, Lyschel Burket, what a joy and a pleasure to have you on our program today. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we are not going to be afraid to get into some hard topics. I know you deal with this all the time and you walk with women through some of these hard places. To start, let's just maybe hear a bit of your story. What brought this? How did you come to need to do this yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, my story started actually probably before I even understood sexuality or even what that was. I grew up in a non-faith-based home. We weren't very connected. My parents certainly had a belief system, but it wasn't necessarily a part of our upbringing. And so, needless to say, I experienced the exposure to porn at a very young age. Just through different avenues and individuals that were around our home and in our home. So, but really the story really started for me about 2 years into my marriage, when my husband, after we had gone to a church service and they had actually shared a guy's testimony about him overcoming his own porn addiction. And I remember leaving that and being a relatively new believer, but just really impressed with his vulnerability and of course questioning the whole concept of porn. Is porn bad? What does that look like? And kind of engaging my husband in this conversation. And I remember it, unfortunately, but I do remember it like it was yesterday, where I said to him, well, you don't struggle with porn, right?
Wow.
And immediately he responded back with a no. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't think so, but I just, in the moment I thought I should ask the question. And quickly thereafter, probably that evening, actually, he ended up coming back and began to confess that he did feel convicted by God, that he did in fact have a problem and he was struggling with it. And he had been trying to do it on his own, which we affectionately refer to as white knuckling it. And he was attempting to do that, and it wasn't working. And he really felt like this opportunity, because the reason the guy was sharing the testimony was they were getting ready to start a men's group. So he felt like this was a great opportunity for him to go get care and get help and learning how to overcome this. And in my own time and space in that moment, I was still a young bride, and I was going to be his biggest cheerleader. And I was like, that's amazing. That's great. Go do whatever you got to do. And I really do believe in my mind that we were never going to talk about it again. Like, I thought he was going to go somewhere, they were going to fix him, and then he was going to come home. And unfortunately, it did not happen that way. I know that all of us wish it would, but about 4 months later, he'd actually gone out on a work trip and ended up what we refer to as relapsed. He relapsed while he was on a work trip, and used pornography while he was out of town. He did, by the grace of God, come home and confess, which I know not all guys do, not all addicts or individuals who struggle do. But I will tell you that in that moment, when that confession came, that is probably when, well, if you've heard me ever share my story before, I use this affectionately, that is when I lost my ever loving mind.
Wow.
Because I did. It hit me really hard, and it hit me to the core, because what I know now that I did not know then was that when he made that commitment to go to group, I took that as a commitment to move towards sobriety with no real understanding that there was going to ever be a relapse. I had no idea that there would ever be this sliding or a choice to go back. It was like, you committed to choosing this lifestyle, and that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And so this relapse was telling me something different. So after a few weeks, I was able to really start to understand what was going on with me. I didn't have a lot of safe community around me. I had nice people.
Yes.
I had kind people. I had people with good intention, but they were not a community that I was necessarily able to unpack this well with. And so because of that, I did find myself kind of, well, I should say I started at first, I vomited everything to anyone that would listen to me for about 4 minutes. And then as I started watching their reactions, I went, oh, this isn't good. Like, they don't want to know this. And so then I just started holding it in, and I just started isolating from people that I knew I really didn't have a good direct answer with. And I started to lose myself, because authenticity was one of my core values, and I could see myself fading and not being able to be authentic in my relationships. I didn't know how to express the pain that was going on for me. So that all led to me eventually finding some safe community with other women. Was not necessarily around my husband's porn use, but it was about just being authentic and real in Christian community. And through that time, I began to heal. And I'll expedite the story just because I know we want to talk about a lot of other great things. In 2011, the Lord asked me to become a safe place for other women. And I'm so thankful that that was the instruction that I felt like I received, because had he said, go out and be this person of expertise and help heal all these women, I'd have been like, you're going to have to move on to the next gal, because that is not who I am. But what he said was to become a safe place for another. And I knew I could do that, because I knew what I needed in that moment for safety. And so that led me to start leading a group at my church. And I got to do that for 5 years, and it was absolutely amazing. I loved being with those women on a regular basis. And at that point, the Lord started calling me into more. And so I ended up going back to school, and I got a professional coaching certification and a training through an organization called AppSats. And that eventually led to me launching a ministry in 2018 called Hope Redefined, which allowed me to be an even greater safe place for more women across the globe on a virtual platform, which has been incredible. So that's what we get to do now, is to be a safe place for women to heal from betrayal trauma.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Lyschel. Beautiful.
Thanks.
I want to ask more about the process, because I think many of those who may be hearing what we say now wish it was just that quick. You know, like you know, my husband's going to go away. He's going to get fixed, come back, and life is going to be beautiful. Yes, yay, God. You know, you did it.
Mhm.
Um, but then you discover it's not quite that. In fact, at all like that. Talk about what went on in your heart when you lost your ever blanking mind.
Mhm.
What were the movements that you had to wrestle with?
Yeah, I do wish that our stories would be tied up with a cute bow, right? Within 30
Yeah.
seconds. Don't we all? But you know, the best way that I can give a visual to a woman to help her understand what's happened is I love to use this reference of it being a traumatic car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that for many women, not all, but for many women, when betrayal is revealed in their relationship, whether they find it, whether it's given to them, maybe the husband confesses, like my husband did, it feels like you've just gone through a traumatic car accident.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, many of us feel ejected from the vehicle. And so, if you think about a woman who has just received information that has literally destroyed her body, soul, spirit, in all those ways, in such a traumatic way, and I just give this, you know, if you could visualize coming up on this kind of accident, this scene, right? And you've got these two bodies laying there. So you've got this husband he knew that the accident was about to happen,
Yeah.
right? He had the information. He was driving the car, but yet he does have some injury because of all the things that come with addiction. And that is completely understandable. And then you have this woman who was in the passenger seat with an unknown. And so what we have traditionally seen to this point is most often when you come up on an accident scene like that, they care immediately for the husband.
Mm-hmm.
So they have groups, they have pastors who are going to step in with accountability. They may have books, they've got something. It may not be the best, but they've got something to care and tend for that individual. The reality was that I was laying on the side of the highway. No one actually asked me how I was. And so, because no one said anything, I started to minimize my own pain and wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, no one asked me how I am. So I need to get over this. I need to get up off this ground and like get back to tending to my children.
Yeah.
Because my husband has to go to these groups now and he's got to do all these things to fix him. And I don't have anything. No one's talking to me about what kind of healing I need. And so it's almost, we tend to move into this space of it being an afterthought.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to heal. No one's talking to me about me healing. And so therefore I must not need healing. But every one of us can give a testimony to the depths and the pain that comes from this story and not knowing what to do with the pain. I don't know if that helped answer the question,
Yes.
Carol, but the
Yeah,
picture I think helps
it
put it
does.
around.
And as I hear you talk about that, I get the idea that not only have I been ejected from the car and lying on the side of the road, but I'm, even if it's not said in so many words, I'm made to feel like I shouldn't be hurting. So I feel worse because other people aren't acknowledging that I'm lying here, you know, bleeding and broken. So it just makes me feel more isolated, more wrong, more weird, like there's something wrong with me for feeling bad because of how this
Absolutely.
happened. That just
Yes.
adds to it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Something that I hear from women who have experienced things like this is, okay, now my husband is doing the work, but there's nothing in my heart that feels like I want to connect. You know, I'm still just, you know, I've put up a wall. He thinks he's doing fine now because he's not acting out in whatever way. But I'm still behind this wall. And what do I do there? My husband wants me to connect, or at least he seems like he's acting okay, but I'm not feeling it.
Mm-hmm. That is a very, I'm going to say typical, I'm going to be bold and use that word. It's a typical season and response to healing. It is very normal for a woman to have to navigate that particular season. Part of it comes to We have a real we do have an intuition, and many women that I get to sit with will talk about, I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know
Yes.
what it was.
Yes.
And so then when the truth comes out and it validates that there was something wrong, but she couldn't figure out what it was, she begins to second guess and question everything now. And so even when a husband steps into recovery, there is going to be this time and place that there's going to have to be a rebuilding of trust.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is not just given, it is earned. And that is true in every relationship. You will earn trust with a stray dog, right? Like you have to earn trust with even the animal kingdom in order to do life with an animal kingdom. Like it's the same as true with our human relationships. We learn how to build trust with people. And so when that trust is broken, such as infidelity and betrayal, it has to be rebuilt. You don't get to just walk in and say, well, I've been to 6 meetings, and so you need to be over this. There has to be, there's an opportunity. And I love to use that word with my clients all the time, is there's always an opportunity to build trust with your partner. Always an opportunity. Part of that is maybe she is melting down. She's just experienced a new trigger. She wasn't prepared for that. She's feeling all of these emotions, unsure what to do with herself.
Yeah.
And instead of him turning back inside, which is familiar for him, he decides that he's going to turn toward her and he's going to show up for her and say, what can I do for you right now? And granted, her answer might be, I need you to leave me alone. But the fact that he even got curious about what he could do to support her is one of those steps towards rebuilding trust. And we talk a lot about this in our support groups, trying to help women even understand what they need in rebuilding trust. Because the truth of the matter is that many of us don't have a clue, right? I remember being a little kid, having friendships as a young girl. And if somebody hurt me and trust was broken, it was done. Like I didn't have skills or know how to rebuild trust with someone. We don't have that conversation in premarital counseling either. So what do I do when this guy breaks my trust? Like, how do we repair that?
Yeah.
And there were so many times where my husband was doing these intentional efforts to rebuild trust, and he constantly kept feeling like a failure because it wasn't speaking to me. And I was always going, that's not working. Like, you taking the trash out is not rebuilding trust with me, because he's a very task-oriented individual, right? So he would do all these tasks to try and rebuild trust with me, but that wasn't what I needed. I needed intentional connection. I needed curiosity. I needed someone to sit and just see me and just help me be seen. So that's one of the gifts that we get to do in community with other women, is to be able to help them even identify, what do you need to rebuild trust? But that's a lot of what you're oftentimes experiencing in this season that you were talking about, which is he's doing all the right things and I'm not okay.
Yeah.
That is another moment of saying there's still healing for you, and that is okay. And we'll oftentimes use these little different graphs that show just the different trajectory that each person takes of the moment of impact, and how she will feel like she goes very low and he goes very high in this at this moment of impact, because for him there's a relief. And all of a sudden he's given all this community and there's people surrounding him and really supporting him. And for many women, their reality turns from, I had community because I was just naturally connected as a woman, and now all of a sudden I have none because I can't tell anybody what's going on. And so she goes really low and she's very isolated, and not many people are talking to her about how she's doing. And so it's a very different experience. And so for each spouse to expect the other one is going to show up for a long time exactly the same is really not realistic. You each have your own journey of healing through this.
You've talked about rebuilding trust, and it sounds very different from forgiveness. And I just want to be explicit about that for a moment, that forgiveness and trust are not the same. Do you have any thought about that?
I do. And I completely agree with you. Forgiveness and trust are not the same. And unfortunately, I kind of grew up in an environment where I was kind of taught that they were. And so it was really hard for me as a woman who was trying to navigate this whole story to figure out how to separate the two.
Mhm.
But the best I've got is that it's important for us to understand that forgiveness doesn't require trust,
Yes.
because forgiveness doesn't require restitution. I can forgive you and choose to have a boundary to not do relationship with you anymore.
Yes.
Right? I can forgive a dead loved one, but I'm never going to do relationship with them again. However, I cannot trust you without forgiving you. It's a
Good.
very complicated thing. So I can't move into trusting you if I haven't spent some form of time forgiving you. It's a really difficult thing. And they oftentimes will happen simultaneously. And I can't tell you that it's like on Tuesday, you're going to forgive, and then Wednesday, you'll start trusting. It's a very organic experience, but they do go together, even though they're very separate.
Yeah. You've referenced your own history just briefly a time or two. You said that you had been exposed to porn, and what your experience was like when you realized this about your husband. Can you maybe just comment on that what that set up for you, or templates in your brain, or whatever phrase you want to use it, how your history impacted how you experienced this in your marriage with your husband?
Absolutely. I would tell you that early exposure to porn, part of it was unknowingly to myself. I was picking up what beauty was.
Yes.
I was picking up what desire was, what was catching the attention of a man. And so while I wouldn't say that I carried myself like someone who was performing pornography, I definitely had a definition. I knew what was, attractive and expected. And then as I got married and this pornography came out, immediately I fell right into the comparison trap that we all do as women. And I remember asking the question over and over again, well, what's your type? Like, what does she look like? Like, can you just tell me your type?
Yes.
And I kept grilling my husband with that question. And he finally responded back and goes, I don't have a type. And I suddenly realized that I think he was telling me the truth, because I don't think because I do know that was the truth, because what we know about addiction and porn addiction in of itself is it is about a consumption.
Yeah.
It's not about forming relationships. It's not about coming in and the attractiveness is very, very temporary. It's more about how will I receive the high that I need to get to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I started learning about that, I suddenly went, okay, well, I'm 5'11", so I'll never be 5'2". I'm a brunette. Sure, I could change my hair color, but it could be red, it could be blonde, it could be right. There was no way that I was ever going to measure up to anything, as much as I kept trying to create her in my mind to see how I was measuring up to my competition. Because the reality was there isn't a competition. It's all a facade. Right. And it has nothing to do with me. Yeah. I mean, I've had so many husbands say this, but will say it has nothing to do with sex. It has nothing to do with the amount of sex. It has everything to do with my uncomfortableness with processing hard emotions.
Wow.
I don't want to go to the hard places, so I go there to cope out. And that allows me to disconnect from the world and withdraw. And then when I feel like I've had enough, then I can come back and insert myself back into the world again, which is really the root of addiction.
I hope people listening heard that it is not about having enough sex, that it's about consumption. It's not about, a particular relationship. And that's why marriage doesn't fix it. I know some people think, well, if we get married, porn won't be an issue. No, because that's not what it's about. And the thing about hard emotions, that just happens to be your drug, because you haven't learned how to deal with hard emotions. I just wanted to park on that for a second. That seems like such a big deal.
Agreed. Many would even call it's an emotional avoidance addiction. That's what it is. Or an addiction. It's a behavior to avoid hard emotions, like I said.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And that comes in a lot of different forms, and it is instigated in a lot of different environments. If you've come from a family of origin that there was a lot of neglect, especially emotional neglect, and you didn't have a lot of coaching or leading from adults in your life to teach you how to deal with hard things.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a son right now who's 10 years old. I can tell you there is a lot of emotions there. And it would be very easy for him to suddenly be introduced to pornography and allow that to become the thing that just distracts him enough that he doesn't have to deal with his hard emotions anymore.
Yeah.
And that is oftentimes the story that most men will share, is that this started in adolescence. And so that's the other part that I always encourage wives when I ask the question, well, when did this start for him? And she'll go, oh, I don't, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I'll go, so he was struggling long before he was actually having sex with people. Like, that is an important moment to recognize for women. It's like the physical intimacy, the physical sex that you were going to experience with your husband was not going to stop this.
Yes. Yes.
And so many times we tend to think that's how I'm going to stop this by being more sexually available. And we've even been coached that way. I mean, I've had pastors ask me questions about what is our sex life like.
Yes.
And the unfortunate part is that you believe them because they're spiritual authority for you. Why wouldn't you want to believe what these people are trying to do or ask the questions they're trying to ask you? Because you want the pain to stop.
Yeah.
Right. So when someone said to me, well, maybe you're not having enough sex, I was like, okay, not enough sex. Got it. Go home, fix it. Right. Because I want my pain to stop.
Yep.
And yet it did not stop. Quite honestly, having more sex even added more pain to the story. So,
ouch. Yeah. That makes me think too, Lyschel, that if it's not primarily about sex, then not doing porn doesn't automatically mean recovery. And I've heard you mention, elsewhere, that sobriety is not it. Can you maybe talk about why it isn't it and what needs to be the goal instead?
yes, there is a difference. We have 2 words that we use in this community, and there's a difference between recovery and sobriety. Because recovery, the best way I know how to describe it, recovery is not doing the bad thing anymore. So I'm not looking at porn, or I'm not surfing the internet looking for whatever information I need to get in order to get the next thing.
Yeah.
So I am not doing the bad behavior anymore. That is sobriety. Sorry, did I get those backwards? No. Okay. I think I got it right. Sobriety.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
recovery, on the other hand, is a choice to go deeper and determine what is it that got me to this position and this point in my life that I thought that was the right answer. And so recovery comes with a lot more work. And unfortunately, I do see a lot of couples where he gets into a group and he hits some form of sobriety.
Yeah.
So let's say I've been sober for 6 months. I've been sober for a year. Why are you not better? Why are you not happy with me? And it's because she's still not seeing the recovery. There's not that next level, that depth that can come with this of, this is what I'm learning about myself. And I'm suddenly recognizing that I don't do hard things very well. And so a lot of times, let me get more words around this. And we just had this conversation last week, actually, in one of our community events that we do. And a gal had asked me that. She said, I don't understand. She's like, he was nicer when he was using. And she said, I feel like a jerk saying that. And I said, oh yeah, that's kind of normal. And she's like, well, no one told me that. I said, I know, it's okay. But what she was saying is that he stopped using porn and understood that was a no-no. We don't do that anymore. He had not yet done the work to know how to navigate stress and hard emotions aside from porn use. And so this is going to sound like a really terrible example, but it's the best one I can come up with, right? It's like, I'm a mom, so forgive me for going to a mom analogy, but
Sure.
if you take a child's pacifier away from them, right? And if anyone's ever navigated that season, it's awful.
Yes.
Right? But it takes time for them to learn how to self-regulate.
Yes.
And sometimes we have to give them a new healthy option in order to take the pacifier away. And so I don't mean this to be derogatory towards individuals, but porn is the pacifier.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that is taken away, there has to be work to learn, how do I do hard things and still learn how to self-regulate?
Yeah.
Because that thing helped me self-regulate all the time. And now I need to find something new.
Yeah.
This is also a really dicey space because a lot of guys will hit sobriety in the current addiction of infidelity, and I keep saying infidelity because I want to make sure that women understand if there's been an affair in the relationship, acting out any kind of external sexual behavior.
That's good.
That there's similarities. I will never tell any woman that her story is exactly like another woman.
Sure.
Because there's so many nuances to each woman's story. However, the healing can be very similar.
Yeah.
Because we're both navigating the pain of betrayal. And
Yeah.
so let me go back to this. So when that pacifier is taken, sometimes what ends up happening is that there's this thing called addiction switching. And so suddenly the addict will pick up a new habit or behavior and become consumed in it. It may look like shopping. It could be eating. It could be drinking, smoking. Video gaming is a big one I hear now. And not all of those are bad, right? They're not all bad. It's moderation, but it's about, am I doing this in order to avoid the emotions that I don't like?
Yeah.
Or am I doing this because I need to go shopping?
Right.
Right. There's a little checks and balance there. And so that's another thing that we oftentimes will have to navigate in our own healing and recovery is when I'm walking with a woman and she goes, so this is what was happening. And now he's doing this all the time and I don't understand. And so we'll talk about, okay, so now he has to find sobriety even from this new thing. Because really what he needs help getting into recovery. He needs help getting into the work that's a deeper dive into what's going on inside.
Yeah.
So
thank you for that. Thank you for acknowledging that, yes, there has been a breach in the marriage fidelity when a man has been going to porn, that is there's a similar response in a woman's heart often. And just saying that, it needs to be said. Lyschel, I'm thinking of two groups of women that maybe you can speak to. One group is those women who now see that their husband is sexually addicted, often to porn, but he's not engaged. Whether or not he acknowledges it's not a good thing, he is not engaged in the process either of sobriety or recovery. He's not on the road. Or and then another group of women who her husband may have gotten some sobriety. He's doing that much, but he's not moving forward into what you're calling recovery. He's not learning how to deal with those hard emotions in healthy ways. Can you just a couple words to those groups of women, maybe?
Yes. Your healing is not dependent on your husband's sobriety. That is like the truest statement I can give you. Your healing is not dependent on whether or not he chooses to get well. The reality is that you are so deeply loved by a father who wants to be there. He wants to be your superhero. He wants to be your knight in shining armor. He wants to come in and rescue you in ways that you can't even really imagine at this point. And I know that sounds like almost a spiritual cliche for women because there's a lot of pain that even comes in our faith when we walk through betrayal. I've had so many friends say to me, I did everything right. I waited for marriage. I picked a Christian guy. I don't understand how this happened to me.
Yes.
Right. And so they're wanting someone to pay. Right. Because they feel like they got damaged goods is essentially what it comes down to. And so the one they're going to blame at this point is God.
Yes.
And my response to that, good, bad, or indifferent, is I go, it's okay. He can take it. Like, he's been blamed for a lot. It's fine.
Yeah.
Because my belief system is that God would rather me talk to him even when I'm angry than not talk to him at all. And so I'm always encouraging women in their stories and in the process of them healing is, go to a mat. He can handle it. He can take care. He can handle your mad. Right. And I think about my own children, right? And they can come to me and tell me how they're so mad at me about something. And I'm like, it's okay. I got it. And part of the reason I can handle their mad or their frustration is because I know the bigger picture, right?
Yes.
I know why I didn't give you the popsicle, because I'm actually taking you out for ice cream later, like, so, but for both women in those two different camps that you laid out, there is maybe a husband who isn't moving as fast as she wants him to, or maybe a woman who's living in a relationship where their husband is not even acknowledging that it's a problem.
Yeah.
She still needs to heal.
Yes.
And, with healing comes the ability to start identifying what's important to you. Mm-hmm. And how do you have healthy boundaries around the things that are important to you? Yeah. And boundaries don't always require, the dissolving of a relationship. It may come to that if you feel like your boundary is being violated over and over again. But the truth is that you can still have, a relationship with someone even when you're not moving in the same direction. The hope is that they might actually consider it when they start to feel the pressure from the boundaries. Yeah. When you say, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z, if you continue to do this, that's fine. So please don't hear me say, stay together just because.
Right.
I want to make sure I'm really clear about that, because I do not want that to be what I communicate. I'm saying that your healing is not dependent on your husband. Yeah. And I don't know what's in this. I don't know what the answer is to your healing, that how your relationship will look, but it's not dependent on your husband.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned that God wants you to bring your stuff to him, even if you're mad. And let's talk about God in the middle of all this for a minute. You alluded to you didn't grow up with a strong faith and relationship with Jesus. You became a follower of Jesus, and that's certainly been a part of your journey. And then this whole area of, well, if I'm mad at God, what do I do with all of that? Just as you have walked with women and in your own journey, what role does God play? How does it look to bring Jesus into this story?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So to answer that, I became a believer when I was about 26. So I had made a lot of mistakes in those 26 years, right? So definitely understood the value of having a savior. I got it as a young adult, like, okay, this person's going to free me to something. But the thing I will say is that what I do see often, whether I walk with women who have been Christians since they came out of the wound, right? Like, dad's a pastor, mom's the worship director, like they've always known that Jesus is their savior, or women who have had a lukewarm relationship with God their whole lives. It doesn't really matter. What I do consistently see is the wrestle with, how do I fit him in here? I don't know how to fit him in the story. Yeah. So you'll typically see women in their healing process, they'll go one of two directions. They'll either go super clinical, and that means they're sitting with therapists, which are fantastic. And I love therapists, and we need therapists and all those things, but the conversations about their faith are never normally integrated into this particular area of their story. So they're going to professionals and getting we call it psychoeducation. They're getting that kind of education about themselves, but no one's really saying, well, how do I apply this to the Word of God? Or what does this mean for me in my faith? Then you have other women who will choose to go the other direction, and it's very faith focused. And the unfortunate part is that they start to lose out on, what does it mean to have boundaries? How do I have some of these really important things that are coming out of their psychoeducation, and knowing what it looks like to have a healthy person, and they're not getting all that part. Okay. So what we attempt to do as a ministry is actually blend the two. We want to make sure that there's a really good balance between the two.
That's
And
good.
that's part of what I'm encouraging women all the time is to consider. We go down into details and levels of, like, we have an entire 10-week study on boundaries. And it's actually a course. It's not a study, it's a course, and it's intended to help support women as they are learning about what are boundaries and how do I do them.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that is we start with, what does the Word of God say about boundaries and how does it model it? Right. And it is fascinating to watch women go, I had no idea. I had no idea that Jesus had boundaries.
Yes.
And you're like, I know, like, in a lot of ways, not just because he went off and took a nap. Like, he had a lot of boundaries when it came to interacting with people who were not healthy and toxic and accusatory. We talk about the Trinity being a boundaried relationship, right? The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, they all have things. They're necessary to the Trinity. And that is important for us to understand that. Like, God did not create a world of chaos. He created order. And with order comes boundaries.
That's beautiful.
So anyway, and so being able to blend those two things, where she may have heard about boundaries in her therapist's office, but not really sure, does this fit with my faith system? It's important for us to be able to do that for women and help them see how it's a both and. But the question you asked me, Carol, the question you asked me was, how do you integrate your faith? Mm-hmm. The number one thing I see women do in this journey is they're just not sure God can handle the mess. They're just not sure. Yeah. And so I'm going to give you this scripture because this was a really powerful aha moment for me. So it is Psalm 34, verses 17 and 18. And it says, the righteous cry out and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. I'm going to read 18 again because this is where I felt like you dropped the mic on me. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Yeah. And I was reading that as I was writing something about grieving. And I went, that's right, Lord, you're close to the brokenhearted. That's awesome. And then I heard it in my core, and I heard, when you refuse to admit that you're brokenhearted, I never get to save you.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I know, it takes my breath away again. So when I refuse to say I am brokenhearted by this, there's nothing for him to save me from. Right? And so this is why I do have such a passion and spend a lot of time with women speaking to the concept of grieving and giving them the permission to be brokenhearted and to understand that it's not going to kill them. Because that was my biggest fear, is I thought if I let the tears start, they'll never stop. But yet he has a plan with those, and having another person walk that journey with you and keep reassuring you that the plan is, you are walking the plan out, you're doing it, instead of just feeling like I'm just lost in this puddle of my pain.
Yeah.
And wow. I think that is so pivotal and so important. And again, in that blending of, how do I pull my faith into this journey with what's going on in my story?
It's beautiful to see you helping individuals integrate that. For somebody who might be brokenhearted and wants to find out more, just take a moment, Lyschel, and invite them to your resources. Where can they find out more?
Oh, yes, I'd love to. So they can find us online at hoperedefined.org, hoperedefined.org. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. We offer online groups. We also have an entire team of professionally trained coaches. So we have 6 or 7 coaches on our team to help women in one-on-one support as they're journeying specific areas of their story. We also do a retreat twice a year that we host outside of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And women from all over the country come to that retreat. It's amazing. It's kind of small. We only take about 12 women at a time, but we do that on purpose. But we also have an online community called Hope Online, and it's a platform that women can access 24/7 and really find legitimate support and encouragement from one another. And we load it up with resources and opportunities for women just to keep learning. So that's how they can find us, is through hoperedefined.org.
Well, I feel like we have only scratched the surface of where we could go with all of this. Seriously, we've just scratched the surface. Thank you so much. We'll make sure links are under this video and in the show notes for this podcast to Hope Redefined and the places you have mentioned. Lyschel, this has been just, I'm struggling to find a word, but this has just been, I believe, showing God's heart. And we are very privileged. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Oh, friend, if something in this conversation stirred you, you're not alone. Do check the links underneath this video to Hope Redefined and the social media and so on that we have there for Lyschel's ministry, the support groups, the retreats. Just there's a lot of goodness there where you can find some support to find a safe place to walk this journey, regardless of what the specifics of your story are. I also want to invite you to leave me a confidential message if you would like. On our website, drcarolministries.com, the contact page there, that message comes directly to me. It's confidential, and I respond personally. And if you are hurting in this area or just have a question or comment and want to reach out to me confidentially, I'd be very happy to hear from you. You know, walking this kind of a journey with God, you need to be connected to people. A lot of the individuals that I talk with feel like, well, Jesus and I are working this through. And I'm glad that you are. But you do need people. That's part of what Lyschel offers, is the safety to others who are feeling this kind of pain. And you need that. You'll also find a link to just a little resource we have. What if I can't talk to anybody? What if I have no one to talk to? What do I do? I have some thoughts. And click that link under this video, and I'll be happy to send that information to you. Just a few practical thoughts about what you can do if you feel like you have nobody to talk to. I would love to hear from you. And please make sure to subscribe to this channel so each time we put up a new resource here, usually every week, that you'll be able to get that too. I would love to stay connected. And now, until next time, may God bless you.